Maya Castellanos had lied on her job application. Not about her references or her experience with children, but about something far more dangerous. She had omitted the 3 years she spent as a combat medic in the Northern Territories, the sleepless nights extracting wounded soldiers from collapsed buildings, and the reason she could identify the sound of incoming artillery from 2 miles away. When the director of Casa Esperanza asked why a 26-year-old woman wanted to work as a babysitter in a remote border town, Maya simply smiled and said she loved children. She never mentioned that she was running from nightmares that had followed her home from war. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The children at Casa Esperanza didn't know they were living in a powder keg. To them, the distant rumble that echoed through the valley every evening was just thunder. The flickering lights weren't power shortages caused by damaged infrastructure. They were disco lights for their impromptu dance parties in the common room. And the reason why Maya always insisted they sleep in the interior rooms wasn't because of safety protocols. It was because those rooms stayed warmer during the mountain nights. Maya had been at the orphanage for 8 months when she first noticed the pattern. The supply trucks that used to arrive every Tuesday had started coming irregularly. The director, Senora Rodriguez, spent more time locked in her office making urgent phone calls in hushed voices. The local villagers who used to visit the children with donated clothes and toys had stopped coming altogether. Most telling of all, the government checkpoints that lined the main road into town had doubled their personnel. The children ranged in age from 4 to 16. There was little Carmen, who collected bottle caps and insisted on braiding Maya's hair every morning. There was Diego, 13 and stubborn, who questioned everything Maya said, but still sought her approval with every small accomplishment. There was Ana Sofia, the oldest at 16, who had become Maya's unofficial assistant and helped wrangle the younger ones during story time. Each child carried their own wounds, their own reasons for being at Casa Esperanza, but together they had formed something resembling a family. Maya's military training had taught her to read situations, to notice when the ordinary became extraordinary. The first warning sign came on a Thursday morning when she was helping the children with their outdoor activities. A convoy of unmarked vehicles passed by the orphanage's front gate, moving faster than normal traffic and heading toward the mountains. The second warning came that afternoon when Senora Rodriguez called Maya into her office and spoke in careful, measured tones about the possibility of temporary relocations. The government has suggested that institutions like ours might benefit from moving closer to the capital, Senora Rodriguez explained, her weathered hands folded tightly on her desk, just as a precautionary measure, you understand. Nothing urgent. Maya understood perfectly. She had seen this before in the territories, the polite evacuations that came hours before zones became uninhabitable. The careful language that officials used when they wanted civilians to leave without causing panic. She also understood that the capital was 300 miles away, and transportation for 20 children would require resources the orphanage didn't possess. That evening, Maya sat with Ana Sofia on the dormitory steps while the younger children played in the courtyard. Ana Sofia was teaching Carmen how to braid friendship bracelets when she looked up at Maya with eyes far too knowing for 16. The older kids are asking questions, Ana Sofia said quietly. They hear the trucks at night. They know something is happening. Maya watched Diego attempting to organize a soccer game while little Tomas clung to his leg, refusing to be left. Out, Carmen was showing her latest bottle cap collection to anyone who would listen, her voice bright and trusting. These children had already lost everything once. Many of them couldn't even remember their families, their lives before Casa Esperanza becoming their entire world. What do you tell them? Maya asked. Ana Sofia shrugged with the practiced nonchalance of someone who had learned early not to expect stability. I tell them that grown-ups worry about things that usually don't happen. But they're smart, Maya. They know when adults are lying. The third warning came at dawn 3 days later. Maya woke to the sound that had haunted her. Dreams for years, the distinctive whistle of incoming mortar. Her body reacted before her mind fully processed what was happening. She was out of bed and moving toward the children's dormitories before the first explosion lit up the valley below. The blast was distant, perhaps 5 miles toward the village, but close enough to rattle the windows and send several of the younger children into tears. Maya found Senora Rodriguez already awake, standing in the main hallway with a satellite phone pressed to her ear. When she ended the call, her face had aged a decade. "The rebels have taken the village," Senora Rodriguez said without preamble. "Government forces are mobilizing for a counterattack. We have perhaps 6 hours before this area becomes a battlefield." Maya felt the familiar calm that settled over her in crisis situations, the mental shift from civilian to soldier that she had hoped never to experience again. "What are our evacuation options?" "There are none." Senora Rodriguez's voice was steady, resigned. "The main roads are blocked. The government convoy that was supposed to escort institutions like ours has been diverted to the eastern provinces. We are on our own." Maya looked toward the dormitories where 20 children were beginning to stir, some still unaware that their world had just shifted into something far more dangerous. Ana Sofia appeared in the hallway, her hair disheveled but her expression alert. She had heard enough to understand. "What do we do?" Ana Sofia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Maya's mind was already calculating distances, routes, supplies. The mountain paths she had memorized during her evening walks weren't just scenic routes anymore. They were potential escape corridors. The emergency supplies she had quietly stockpiled in the storage room weren't just precautionary measures. They were survival resources. The physical conditioning she maintained wasn't just personal discipline. It was preparation for carrying injured children across hostile terrain. "We get them ready," Maya said, her voice carrying an authority that made both Ana Sofia and Senora Rodriguez straighten instinctively, quickly and quietly. "Essential supplies only. We leave within the hour." Senora Rodriguez stared at her. "Leave for where?" "These are children, Maya. Some of them can barely walk long distances. Little Carmen still has nightmares when she's away from familiar surroundings. And Tomas, he's only 4 years old." "I know." Maya was already moving toward the supply room, her military training overriding 8 months of carefully constructed civilian persona. "But staying here isn't an option anymore." As if to emphasize her point, another explosion echoed from the valley, closer this time. The children's voices rose in the dormitories, confused and frightened. Maya could hear Diego trying to calm the younger ones, his 13-year-old voice attempting confidence he didn't feel. Maya pulled Ana Sofia aside. "I need you to help me with something, and I need you to trust me completely." "Can you do that?" Ana Sofia nodded without hesitation. "What do you need?" "Help me wake the children and get them dressed. Tell them we're going on an adventure, a camping trip in the mountains. Don't let them bring toys or personal items. Just clothes and their backpacks. Make it sound exciting, not scary." As Ana Sofia hurried toward the dormitories, Maya turned to Senora Rodriguez. "I need you to gather every bit of food that travels well. Crackers, dried fruit, anything that won't spoil. Also water bottles, blankets, and any medical supplies we have." "Maya, you're talking about leading 20 children through mountain terrain during an active military conflict. This isn't a camping trip, this is madness." Maya met her eyes steadily. "Senora Rodriguez, I haven't told you everything about my background. Before I came here, I spent 3 years in the Northern Territories. I know how to move people safely through combat zones. I know how to read terrain, how to avoid patrols, how to treat injuries in the field. Most importantly, I know what happens to civilians who get caught between opposing forces. Understanding dawned in the older woman's eyes. You were military, combat medic, and right now, that's exactly what these children need. The sound of vehicles approaching made them both freeze. Maya moved to the window and peered through the edge of the curtain. 3 military trucks were climbing the dirt, rode toward the orphanage, their headlights cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. They weren't government vehicles. Back entrance, Maya said urgently. We leave now. But even as she said it, Maya knew they were out of time. The vehicles were too close, and the children weren't ready. 20 young lives were about to be caught in the crossfire of someone else's war, and Maya Castellanos, who had come to Casa Esperanza to escape her past, was about to discover that some skills can never be left behind. The babysitter who had spent 8 months braiding hair and reading bedtime stories was gone. In her place stood someone who understood that protection sometimes required more than gentle words and patience. It required the willingness to face down-armed soldiers with nothing but determination and the fierce love of someone who refuses to let innocence become a casualty of war. The first truck stopped at the front gate, and Maya knew their peaceful morning routine was over forever. Maya's training kicked in like muscle memory. She grabbed the emergency backpack she had prepared weeks ago and slung it over her shoulder while moving toward the children's quarters. The rebel trucks were still approaching, their engines growing louder with each passing second. She had maybe 3 minutes before they reached the main building. Ana Sofia, Maya called softly but urgently. Change of plans. We're leaving through the kitchen exit right now. The 16-year-old didn't question her. She had learned to trust Maya's instincts over the past months, and the steel in Maya's voice told her everything she needed to know. Ana Sofia began waking the children systematically, starting with the older ones who could help with the younger ones. Maya found Senora Rodriguez in the storage room, frantically stuffing supplies into canvas bags. There's no time, Maya said, taking the bags from her. Take only what you can carry easily. We need to move fast. Where are we going? Senora Rodriguez asked, her hands shaking as she tried to organize bottles of water. Into the Cordillera Peaks. There are caves about 12 miles northeast of here. I scouted them during my evening walks. Maya shouldered 2 of the supply bags. It's rough terrain, but it's invisible from the roads and provides natural shelter. The sound of boots on the front porch made them both freeze. Male voices speaking in rapid commands. Maya recognized the dialect as belonging to the rebel factions that had been pushing south for months. She also recognized the tone. These weren't soldiers coming to negotiate or provide assistance. Maya moved swiftly to the children's dormitory. 20 pairs of eyes looked up at her, ranging from confusion to outright fear. Little Carmen was clutching her favorite bottle cap, tears streaming down her face. Tomas had wrapped himself around Ana Sofia's leg and refused to let go. Diego stood protectively in front of the younger boys, his jaw set in determination despite the tremor in his hands. Listen to me carefully, Maya said, dropping to one knee so she could meet their eyes at their level. We're going to play a very special game. It's called the Quiet Adventure Game. We're going to walk very quietly out the back door and into the mountains. No talking, no crying, and definitely no stopping. The first rule of the Quiet Adventure Game is that everyone stays together. The second rule is that everyone listens to me and Ana Sofia. Can everyone do that? The older children nodded immediately. The younger ones looked uncertain but followed the lead of their peers. Maya had learned that children were remarkably adaptable when given clear instructions and a sense of purpose. Heavy footsteps echoed through the main hallway, growing closer to their wing of the building. Maya heard drawers being yanked open, furniture being overturned. Whatever the rebels were looking for, they were being methodical about their search. Maya helped Tomas onto Diego's back piggyback style, then lifted Carmen into her own arms. She distributed the older children between herself, Ana Sofia, and Senora Rodriguez, creating 3 small groups that could move more quietly than one large one. The emergency supplies were divided among the oldest children who could handle the extra weight. They slipped out through the kitchen door just as the rebels reached the dormitory wing. Maya led them across the small vegetable garden behind the orphanage, keeping low and moving in single file toward the tree line. The morning air was crisp and thin at this altitude, and Maya could see her breath mixing with the fog that clung to the mountain slopes. The first mile was the most dangerous. They had to cross open meadowland where they would be visible from the orphanage buildings. Maya kept them moving in the shadows of rock formations and the sparse forest coverage, pausing frequently to listen for pursuit. The children followed her instructions without complaint, even little Carmen, who whispered her questions instead of speaking out loud. When they reached the cover of the pine forest, Maya allowed herself a moment to assess their situation. All 20 children were accounted for. No one was injured. The younger ones were tired but still mobile. Most importantly, they had put enough distance between themselves and Casa Esperanza that they were no longer in immediate danger of being discovered. But Maya knew this was just the beginning. 12 miles through mountain terrain with 20 children, some as young as 4 years old, was going to test every skill she had learned in the territories. She also knew that rebels who had taken the trouble to search an orphanage weren't going to simply give up and leave. They would likely establish patrols and search the surrounding area systematically. "How are you doing, miss?" Ana Sofia asked quietly during their first real rest stop. They had been walking for 2 hours, and the children were sitting in small clusters, sharing water and the dried fruit Senora Rodriguez had managed to salvage. Maya was studying a hand-drawn map she had made during her previous scouting trips. "Doing what?" "Leading us like this. You know exactly where you're going. How to keep us hidden. How to organize the children so they don't panic. This isn't babysitter knowledge." Maya looked at the teenager who had become her closest ally over the past months. Ana Sofia deserved the truth, especially now when their lives might depend on trust and cooperation. "I was a soldier before. I came to Casa Esperanza," Maya said simply. "Combat medic with the National Forces. I served 3 tours in the Northern Territories during the border conflicts." Ana Sofia's eyes widened. "Why didn't you tell us?" "Because I came here to forget about that part of my life. I thought I could leave it behind and just be someone who took care of children and read bedtime stories." Maya folded the map and tucked it back into her pocket. "I was wrong. Some skills don't disappear just because you want them to." Diego appeared beside them, his young face serious. "Are we going to die up here?" The question was direct and honest, and Maya respected him enough to answer the same way. "Not if I can help it. But it's going to be hard, and everyone needs to stay strong and follow instructions." "Can you help me with the younger ones?" Diego nodded. "What do you need me to do?" "Keep them focused on the next step, not the whole journey. Make up games that involve walking quietly. Help them see this as an adventure instead of something scary." For the next 4 hours, Maya led them deeper into the Cordillera Range. The terrain grew more challenging as they climbed, but it also provided better cover and fewer access points for vehicles. Maya chose routes that would be difficult for anyone unfamiliar with the mountains to follow, doubling back on their own trail several times to confuse potential trackers. The children adapted better than Maya had expected. The older ones took responsibility for the younger ones without being asked. Carmen discovered that she could spot interesting rocks and plants along the trail, turning their escape into a nature exploration. Even Tomas stopped crying and started pointing out birds and butterflies to anyone who would listen. But Maya could see the signs of exhaustion beginning to set in. Slower steps, more frequent requests for water breaks, younger children asking to be carried more often. They needed to reach shelter before the children's energy reserves were completely depleted. As the afternoon sun began to angle lower through the pine branches, Maya spotted the landmark she had been looking for. A distinctive rock formation that marked the entrance to the cave system she had discovered months earlier. The caves were part of an old mining complex, abandoned decades ago, but still structurally sound. "Almost there," she announced to the group. 20 more minutes of walking, and then we can rest properly." The caves were better than Maya had remembered. The main chamber was large enough to accommodate all 20 children comfortably, with smaller side chambers that could serve as storage areas and sleeping quarters for the adults. A small underground stream provided fresh water, and the entrance was concealed enough that they would be invisible from any standard search pattern. As the children explored their new temporary home, exclaiming over the echo effects and the interesting rock formations, Maya felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Not just relief at reaching safety, but pride in what she had accomplished. She had successfully moved 20 vulnerable children away from immediate danger and into a defensible position without losing a single one. Ana Sofia found her sitting at the cave entrance, watching the sun set over the valley below. "You saved us," the teenager said quietly. Maya shook her head. "We saved ourselves. Everyone did their part. The children are asking questions about you. They want to know how you knew about the caves, how you knew which paths to take. What did you tell them?" Ana Sofia smiled. "I told them that sometimes people have skills they don't talk about until those skills are needed. And that you're not just a babysitter. You're someone who protects people." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As darkness settled over the mountains, Maya helped the children arrange their sleeping areas and distributed the remaining food supplies. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight they were safe. 20 children who had started the day as refugees were ending it as survivors, and Maya Castellanos had discovered that some identities can't be left behind because they're exactly who you need to be when it matters most. Maya woke before dawn to the sound of distant helicopter rotors. She lay still for a moment, listening to the rhythm and direction of the aircraft. Military transport, not search and rescue. The sound was moving north to south, following the main valley routes rather than conducting a systematic aerial search of the mountain terrain. Around her, 20 children slept peacefully on makeshift beds of pine branches covered with the blankets they had managed to bring from Casa Esperanza. 3 days in the caves had established routines that helped maintain morale. The older children had organized games and storytelling sessions. Carmen had appointed herself the official cave decorator, arranging interesting rocks and wildflowers in patterns that made their temporary home feel less like hiding and more like camping. But Maya knew their supplies wouldn't last much longer. More critically, she had been monitoring radio chatter on the emergency frequency and understood that the conflict below was escalating rather than resolving. Government forces were pushing back against the rebel advance, which meant the entire region would remain unstable for weeks or possibly months. Ana Sofia stirred beside her, instantly alert in the way that children in uncertain situations learn to wake up. "How long have you been awake?" she whispered. "About an hour. We need to make a decision today about our next move." Maya kept her voice low to avoid waking the others. "We can't stay here indefinitely. Where would we go?" Ana Sofia asked, though Maya could tell from her tone that the teenager had been thinking about the same problem. Maya pulled out the radio and showed Ana Sofia the map she had been working on by flashlight. "There's an international relief station about 40 miles east of here, just across the border. It's run by humanitarian organizations, completely neutral territory. The children would be safe there, and there are resources to help them find permanent placement with families." Ana Sofia studied the map, tracing the route with her finger. 40 miles through mountain terrain with 20 children. Some of them are already getting sick from the altitude and the cold nights. Maya nodded. It's not going to be easy. But the alternative is staying here until our food runs out, or trying to go back to an area that's now an active war zone. Diego appeared at Maya's shoulder, having woken during their quiet conversation. Are we leaving the caves? He asked. Maya looked at the 13-year-old who had become her unofficial lieutenant over the past 3 days. Diego had demonstrated remarkable leadership skills, organizing the younger children into groups for daily activities and helping resolve the small conflicts that inevitably arose when 20 people lived in close quarters. We're talking about it, Maya said honestly. What do you think? Diego considered the question with the seriousness of someone much older. The little ones are scared, but they're trying to be brave. Tomas asks every night when we're going home, but I don't think he understands that Casa Esperanza might not be there anymore. Carmen pretends this is all a game, but she cries when she thinks no one is looking. And the older ones? We know we can't stay here forever. We also know that whatever you decide, we'll follow you. You got us out safely when no one else could have. Diego paused, then asked the question Maya had been dreading. Are you planning to come with us to this relief station? Maya felt Ana Sophia's eyes on her as well. It was the question she had been avoiding because she didn't have a clear answer. The relief station would provide safety and resources for the children, but it would also mean returning to official channels, documentation, questions about her military background, and why she had been working under a civilian identity. Let's focus on getting everyone there safely first, Maya said finally. Then we'll figure out the rest. She spent the morning preparing the children for what would be their most challenging journey yet. Unlike their escape from Casa Esperanza, this wouldn't be a single day's hike to nearby shelter. They would need to cross exposed terrain, navigate river crossings, and maintain the physical and emotional stamina required for multiple days of difficult travel. Maya organized them into 4 groups of 5 children each, with the older children responsible for keeping track of the younger ones. She distributed the remaining supplies evenly and made sure each group had at least one older child who could read a map and follow basic navigation instructions. This is going to be different from our trip to the caves, Maya explained to the assembled group. It's going to take longer, and it's going to be harder. But at the end, there will be people who can help us find permanent safe homes for everyone. Little Carmen raised her hand. Will we still be together? Maya felt her throat tighten. It was the question she had been hoping no one would ask because she couldn't provide the answer Carmen wanted to hear. I don't know, she said gently. But I know that all of you will always remember each other, and the families who adopt you will be lucky to have such brave children. Senora Rodriguez, who had been quietly supportive throughout their time in the caves, pulled Maya aside as the children prepared their backpacks. You're not planning to stay with them at the relief station, are you? Maya didn't answer directly. They need stability and legitimate care. I'm not in a position to provide that long term. Because of your military background? Because I'm still trying to figure out who I am when I'm not running from something or protecting someone. Maya shouldered her pack and checked her compass. These children deserve caregivers who have their lives figured out. The journey to the relief station took 4 days. Maya had planned the route to avoid main roads and known patrol areas, but the terrain was unforgiving. They climbed rocky ridges that left the younger children exhausted and descended into valleys where they had to wade across swift-moving streams with water cold enough to take their breath away. On the second night, Tomas developed a fever. Maya used her medical training to assess his condition and determined it was likely a minor respiratory infection exacerbated by the altitude and cold. But she knew he needed proper medical care soon. She carried him for most of the 3rd day, allowing him to rest while maintaining their pace toward the border. Ana Sofia and Diego stepped up in ways that amazed Maya. They took responsibility for navigation when Maya was focused on Tomas's condition. They organized rest stops and meal breaks without being asked. Most importantly, they maintained morale among the other children by creating games and challenges that made the difficult journey feel achievable. On the fourth morning, Maya spotted the international flags that marked the relief station perimeter. The compound was larger than she had expected, with proper medical facilities, dormitory buildings, and administrative offices staffed by representatives from several humanitarian organizations. The intake process was efficient and compassionate. Medical personnel immediately examined all 20 children, providing treatment for minor injuries and illnesses. Social workers began the complex process of documenting each child's situation and identifying potential placement options. Most importantly, the children were given hot meals, warm beds, and the assurance that they were finally safe. Maya completed the necessary paperwork and provided her contact information, but she declined the offers to stay in staff housing while the children's cases were processed. She knew that her presence would only complicate the legal procedures required to find permanent homes for them. On her last evening at the station, Maya sat with the children during dinner. They were different now than they had been a week ago. Not just physically stronger from their mountain journey, but emotionally more resilient. They had survived something that would have challenged adults, and they knew it. Carmen presented Maya with a small collection of rocks she had gathered during their travels. "So you remember our adventure," she said seriously. Diego shook her hand like an adult. "Thank you for teaching us that we're stronger than we thought we were." Ana Sofia hugged her tightly and whispered, "You showed us what it means to protect people you love." Maya realized that she had been wrong about something fundamental. She hadn't been running from her identity as a soldier. She had been running toward her identity as a protector. The children hadn't needed a babysitter during their escape from Casa Esperanza. They had needed someone willing to put their safety above everything else, someone with the skills and determination to lead them through the impossible. 3 months later, Maya received letters from 12 of the children who had been placed with families in safe regions. Carmen was learning to play piano and had started a new rock collection. Diego was excelling in school and teaching younger children in his new neighborhood how to organize group activities. Ana Sofia was studying to become a social worker. Each letter contained the same message in different words. They were grateful not just for being saved, but for learning that ordinary people could be extraordinary when circumstances demanded it. They had learned that protection wasn't just about physical safety, but about believing in each other's strength. Maya kept the letters in a folder next to her new job application. She had accepted a position with an international humanitarian organization specializing in emergency evacuations and child protection in conflict zones. Her military experience was no longer something she tried to hide. It was exactly what qualified her to do work that mattered. The babysitter who had once believed she was running from her past had discovered she was running toward her purpose. And 20 children who had learned what it meant to be protected had grown into young people who understood what it meant to protect others. 2 years after delivering 20 children to safety across mountain terrain, Maya Castellanos stood in another compound, facing another impossible situation. This time, she wore the official blue vest of the International Child Protection Agency, and her radio crackled with updates from coordination centers across 3 countries. But the feeling in her stomach was exactly the same as that morning when she had heard trucks approaching Casa Esperanza. The refugee camp outside the city of Valderas housed nearly 8,000 displaced families, but Maya's focus was on a specific section. Building C7 contained 43 unaccompanied minors, children who had become separated from their families during the latest wave of regional instability. Unlike the orphans she had once cared for, these children still held hope of reunification. With parents, siblings, and relatives who might be anywhere across a continent torn by conflict. Maya's supervisor, Dr. Elena Varga, spread satellite images across the table in the Emergency Operations Center. Intelligence reports indicate armed groups will reach this area within 72 hours. Standard evacuation protocols call for transporting vulnerable populations to the nearest secure facility, which is the processing center in Montalba. Maya studied the photos, her trained eye picking out details that civilian coordinators might miss. Montalba is 130 miles south. The main highways between here and there cross through 3 disputed territories. Any convoy large enough to transport 8,000 people will be visible from aircraft and vulnerable to interdiction. The alternative is attempting to shelter in place and hoping the armed groups bypass civilian areas, Dr. Varga replied. Historical precedent suggests that's optimistic. Maya was already calculating different scenarios, her mind automatically falling into the tactical assessment patterns she had learned in the military and refined during her time in the mountains, with 20 children who had trusted her with their lives. What about partial evacuation? Move the most vulnerable populations first using smaller, less visible transport methods. Dr. Varga looked skeptical. The logistics alone would be overwhelming, and who determines which people are most vulnerable? Families with infants? Elderly individuals with medical conditions? The unaccompanied minors? Maya knew the answer to that question, but she also knew it wasn't her decision to make. Her official role was protection specialist for unaccompanied minors, which meant her primary responsibility was the 43 children in Building C7, but something inside her rebelled against the idea of prioritizing some lives over others based on administrative categories. That evening, Maya walked through the camp as she did every night, not just through the children's section, but through the entire facility. She had learned during her time with the Casa Esperanza children that understanding the whole situation was essential for protecting any part of it. Families cooking dinner over small propane stoves looked up as she passed, some nodding in recognition, others maintaining the careful distance that displaced people learned to keep with authority figures. In Building C7, Maya found the usual evening scene. Older children helping younger ones with homework assignments provided by the camp's volunteer teachers. Small groups clustered around battery-powered radios, listening to music or news broadcasts in languages Maya was still learning to recognize. The familiar sounds of children adapting to circumstances beyond their control. 16-year-old Marcus approached her with the purposeful stride she remembered from Diego during their mountain journey. Marcus had become the unofficial leader among the older children in Building C7, organizing daily activities and mediating disputes with the same natural authority she had seen before. "Miss Maya, the children are asking questions about the increased security patrols," Marcus said quietly. "They want to know if we're moving again." Maya had learned to be honest with children while still maintaining their sense of security. "There might be changes in the next few days. Nothing is decided yet, but I want everyone to be prepared for the possibility of travel." Marcus nodded, accepting the information without demanding details he understood she might not be able to share. "Should we start organizing personal items like last time?" The reference to last time indicated that Marcus had been through evacuation procedures before. Maya realized that for many of these children, displacement wasn't a single traumatic event, but an ongoing condition that required constant adaptation. "Not yet," Maya said. "But it wouldn't hurt to make sure everyone knows where they're important." Documents are kept. Over the next 24 hours, Maya watched the camp transform as rumors and uncertainty spread through the population. Families began packing belongings they had just finished unpacking from their previous move. Children who had started to form friendships and routines began the emotional withdrawal that prepared them for another separation. Maya's radio crackled with updates throughout the day. Armed groups were moving faster than intelligence estimates had predicted. The window for organized evacuation was shrinking. Most concerning, reports suggested that the groups specifically targeted infrastructure and civilian facilities that could be used by opposing forces, which included refugee camps and humanitarian facilities. Dr. Varga called an emergency meeting of senior staff. "We have authorization to begin immediate evacuation of essential personnel and vulnerable populations. The host government is providing military escort for 3 convoys departing at 6-hour intervals starting tomorrow morning." Maya studied the evacuation plan with growing unease. The convoys would follow the main highway directly south to Montalba, moving during daylight hours when visibility was highest, but also when they would be most exposed to observation. Each convoy could transport approximately 2,000 people, which meant that some families would be separated across different departure times. "What about the children in Building C7? Maya asked. "First convoy, priority loading. They'll be the safest and have the best chance of successful transport." Maya understood the logic, but she also understood something that the evacuation planners might not have considered. Separating the unaccompanied minors from the families they had formed relationships with in the camp would recreate the trauma of displacement all over again. Many of the children had been informally adopted by other refugee families. Removing them first would break bonds that provided emotional stability in an unstable world. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She walked through the camp again, observing details that had become routine but now seemed significant. The elderly man who shared his evening meal with 3 children who weren't his grandchildren. The woman who had been teaching a group of teenagers to weave baskets from camp materials. The families who had rearranged their sleeping areas to include children who had no one else. Maya realized that the camp wasn't just a collection of displaced individuals waiting for official processing. It had become a community where people had formed new families, new support systems, new reasons to care about each other's survival. Breaking up that community through bureaucratic evacuation procedures might save lives in the short term, but it would destroy something equally important. When Maya returned to Building C7, she found Marcus sitting by one of the windows, looking out at the camp's perimeter lights. "Can't sleep either?" he asked. Maya sat beside him. "Too much to think about." "The other children are scared," Marcus said. "Not about traveling, we're used to that. They're scared about being separated from the families here who have been taking care of us." Maya felt something click into place. The same clarity she had experienced when she realized that staying at Casa Esperanza wasn't an option. "Marcus, what if there was a way to keep everyone together during the evacuation? What if instead of following official convoy routes, we found a safer way to move that didn't separate families?" Marcus turned to look at her directly. "Are you talking about what I think you're talking about?" Maya was already pulling out her maps, spreading them on the floor between them. "I'm talking about making sure that 43 children don't lose the families they've found, just because those families aren't officially documented." Marcus studied the maps with the same intensity that Ana Sofia had once brought to navigation discussions in mountain caves. "This would be dangerous for you. If the official evacuation works, and we're not part of it, you could get in serious trouble. And if the official evacuation doesn't work, 43 children could end up in exactly the same situation they were in before they found safety here." Maya traced alternative routes on the map with her finger. "Sometimes protecting people means taking risks that aren't in any manual." As dawn approached, Maya made a decision that would define the rest of her career. She wasn't going to evacuate the unaccompanied minors separately from their chosen families. She was going to find a way to move the entire community of 8,000 people safely, using lessons learned from 20 children who had taught her that family isn't determined by paperwork, but by the willingness to take care of each other when everything else falls apart. The babysitter who had become a soldier, who had become a protector, was about to become something else entirely. She was about to become someone who understood that the most important evacuations aren't the ones that follow official procedures, but the ones that keep families together no matter what forms they take. Maya spent the next 18 hours doing something that would have been impossible without everything she had learned from 20 children, who trusted her to lead them through mountains. She convinced 8,000 people to abandon the official evacuation plan and follow her instead. It started with Marcus and the children in Building C7. Maya explained her alternative route to the group of 43 unaccompanied minors, showing them how they could travel with their chosen families instead of being separated into official transport. The children understood immediately what she was offering them, because they had learned the difference between bureaucratic safety and real protection. Marcus became her messenger, moving through the camp with the quiet authority that children often possessed when adults had failed them too many times. He spoke to the families who had informally adopted children from Building C7, explaining that there was an option to stay together. Word spread from family to family, building to building, carried by people who had learned to trust unofficial networks more than official announcements. Maya's radio buzzed constantly with updates from the coordination center. The armed groups were 12 hours ahead of intelligence projections. The official convoys would depart in 6 hours, with or without full participation. Dr. Varga was requesting Maya's immediate presence for final briefings on priority evacuations. Instead, Maya was meeting with camp elders, religious leaders, and the informal coordinators who actually managed daily life for 8,000 displaced people. She spread her maps on a table in the community center and explained her proposal with the directness she had learned from dealing with children who needed honest answers. The official route follows the main highway south to Montalba, Maya said, tracing the government-approved evacuation path. It's the fastest route, but it crosses 3 areas where hostile forces are known to operate. The convoys will be large, slow, and visible from aircraft. An elderly woman named Esperanza, who had become the unofficial coordinator for families with small children, studied the map carefully. What are you suggesting instead? Maya traced a different path with her finger, one that curved east through mountain terrain before turning south toward the border. This route is longer and more difficult, but it uses terrain that vehicles can't access easily. It also ends at the International Humanitarian Zone at Puerto Esperanza, which has better resources for family reunification than the processing center at Montalba. A man who had been organizing work details among the adult refugees looked skeptical. 8,000 people through mountain terrain? Many of our elderly can barely walk the distances required for daily activities here in the camp. Maya had anticipated this concern. Not 8,000 at once. We move in groups of 50 to 100, staggered over 3 days. The stronger groups help establish rest points and supply caches for the groups that follow. Everyone travels at the pace of the slowest member. Marcus, who had been listening from the edge of the group, spoke up. Miss Maya has done this before. She knows how to move people safely through difficult places. Maya felt the weight of their trust settling on her shoulders the same way it had when she first realized that 20 children were depending on her to get them out of Casa Esperanza alive. But this was different. This wasn't just about moving vulnerable people away from immediate danger. This was about preserving the community they had built together, keeping families intact regardless of whether their relationships were officially documented. Dr. Varga appeared in the doorway of the community center, her expression tight with frustration. Maya, the first convoy departs in 4 hours. We need the unaccompanied minors processed and loaded immediately. Maya stood slowly, aware that every person in the room was watching her response. Dr. Varga, I need to discuss alternative arrangements for the children in Building C7. There are no alternative arrangements. Official evacuation protocols are not optional. Maya felt the same calm determination she had experienced when facing down rebels at Casa Esperanza, the clarity that came from knowing exactly what needed to be done regardless of the consequences. The children have formed family bonds with other refugees in this camp. Separating them violates the principle of family unity that's supposed to guide all humanitarian operations. Dr. Varga's voice rose. Maya, you're talking about ignoring direct orders from the coordination center. This could end your career. This is my career, Maya replied quietly. Protecting children means protecting the families they've chosen, not just the ones that appear on official documents. The confrontation that followed lasted 20 minutes. Dr. Varga threatened disciplinary action, termination, and professional blacklisting. Maya listened respectfully, then explained that she would be filing her own report, documenting the humanitarian concerns with separating children from their caregivers during emergency evacuations. When Dr. Varga left to coordinate the official convoys, Maya turned back to the assembled community leaders. Anyone who wants to join the official evacuation should do so. There's no judgment about choosing the safest option for your family. But for those who want to stay together and take the longer route, we leave in small groups starting at midnight. Over the next 6 hours, Maya watched something extraordinary happen. Families began organizing themselves not based on official categories or processing status, but based on their actual relationships and their ability to support each other during difficult travel. The elderly were paired with strong young adults who could assist with mobility. Families with medical supplies shared them with families who had children with chronic conditions. People who spoke multiple languages positioned themselves to help communicate with families who had different first languages. Marcus coordinated the children from Building C7, but instead of keeping them together as a separate group, he integrated them with the families who had been caring for them. Maya watched a 5-year-old girl who had been terrified and silent for months, chattering excitedly to the grandmother who had been braiding her hair every morning. She saw teenage boys who had been getting into fights over camp resources, working together to organize supplies for the families they had decided to protect. The first group of 80 people left at midnight, led by Maya and including the families. With the youngest children and the elderly who would need the most rest stops, they moved through the darkness using the techniques Maya had developed during her mountain journey, staying in single file, maintaining noise discipline, and following terrain features that would be invisible to aerial surveillance. The second group departed at dawn, led by Marcus and including many of the families with school-aged children who could handle more challenging terrain. The third group left that evening, comprising mostly adults and teenagers who could move faster and help establish the supply caches that the earlier groups would need. Maya's group reached the first major rest point after 18 hours of walking, a natural clearing beside a mountain stream where they could refill water supplies and allow the children to sleep safely. As she helped families set up temporary shelters, Maya realized that something fundamental had changed in how she understood her work. At Casa Esperanza, she had been protecting children from external dangers. During her early humanitarian work, she had been following protocols designed by other people to address situations those people had never personally experienced. But here, she was helping an entire community protect itself, using its own knowledge of how families worked and what children needed to thrive. The journey to Puerto Esperanza took 4 days for the first group, 5 for the second, and 6 for the third. They lost no one. More importantly, they arrived as an intact community rather than as individual refugees requiring separate processing. The children from Building C7 had families. The elderly had support systems. The families had the cultural and linguistic connections that made adaptation to new circumstances possible. 6 months later, Maya received a letter from the International Humanitarian Council. She had been selected for the Outstanding Service Award, recognizing her innovative approach to community-based evacuation procedures. The letter noted that her methods had been adopted as new protocols for maintaining family unity during emergency relocations. Maya kept the award letter in the same folder as the letters from the Casa Esperanza children and the photos from Puerto Esperanza. showing 8,000 people celebrating their safe arrival with a festival that lasted 3 days. But the document she valued most was a simple note from Marcus, written on Humanitarian Zone letterhead, where he now worked as a youth coordinator. "Miss Maya," the note read, "you taught us that family isn't something that happens to you. It's something you choose to create and protect. The kids from Building C7 are all doing well. We're still taking care of each other. Thank you for showing us that the people who protect us don't have to choose between following rules and doing what's right." Maya Castellanos had started as someone who believed her job was to take care of children while other people made the important decisions. She had become someone who understood that protecting children meant questioning every system, challenging every protocol, and sometimes building entirely new approaches that put human relationships above administrative convenience. The babysitter, who had once hidden her military training, had become a humanitarian who used every skill she possessed to ensure that protection meant keeping families together, not just keeping people alive. And 20 children who had trusted her to lead them through mountains had grown into young adults who understood that real leadership and creating communities where everyone had someone who would never let them face danger alone. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.